So welcome to our final session of day one at the 38th International Churchill Conference, and I'm delighted to be joined once again by Dan Snow, as well as our keynote speaker today, the man who needs no introduction. We are going live to California with actor, philanthropist, and former governor of California. Please welcome Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Anyway, it's great to be here. Great to smoke my Churchill cigar. It's great to have Winston Churchill's bust right behind me over my shoulder.
Well, it's good to have you too, Governor.
And it's great to be here and to have one of my favorite books here by Boris Johnson about Churchill. So I'm surrounded by Churchill stuff, even though I'm not a historian or anything like that, but I became a big fan of his. So I want to say thank you to Catherine, thank you to Alan, and to Dan, and to Randolph for having me there and for doing such a great job. I've been watching you the last hour. It's really great and very stimulating and thought-provoking, all the stuff that you're talking about. And so it's great to be part of this today. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much for agreeing to do it. You grew up in the shadow of defeat in the Second World War. You grew up in Austria. When did you come? When were you aware of Churchill? What did he mean to you and your community when you were a young man?
Well, you don't have to rub in the defeat. I mean, we all know that. You kind of underlined it. But okay, let me just tell you that I have fond memories of the Brits. And I became a fan of England, the British people at the age of 6, 7, 8, because we had the British trucks and the British tanks riding by and driving by our house when I grew up in Thal, right outside of Graz, my hometown. And I think that had an effect also on me eventually when I got to the military in Austria, to become a tank driver, because I was so impacted by these huge trucks and by these huge vehicles and tanks and all that stuff. And the British soldier would just have us kids come climb up on the tanks, and they would give us candies and cookies and stuff like that. And the funny thing about it was that always afterwards, when I went home and told my mother about it, I said, you know, the guys were just giving us cookies and candies, and they're such nice men. And my mother just says, the British. And she would just spit. And so of course, at that point, I didn't know anything about politics, so much about the war at all, even though it was just post-Second World War, and we were still occupied by the 4 Allied forces. But it became very clear later on, because I remember as I grew up, and it was now the 60s, and Churchill died. And my mother said, "Endlich ist tot, dieses Schwein." And so I said to myself, why is she so hostile? Why does she say, finally he's dead, that pig, and all that kind of stuff? So she was still kind of like from the Second World War brainwashed and all of that, and did not see this as kind of like the Allied forces and kind of like they're helping to rebuild again after Hitler and all that stuff. But the interesting thing about it was that I was really influenced by that. I became a big fan. So this is, of course, the next generation now. And I went to England, and I won the Mr. Universe contest in London with the age of 20, and I became a big fan of England. I said, oh, they were these great guys when I was this kid, and soldiers that gave us food and all this stuff and candies. And now, I'm winning here my Mr. Universe contest in London. England is becoming kind of the springboard to my career. I won then the second Mr. Universe contest, and this was now at the age of 20 and 21. I became the youngest Mr. Universe ever. And also my idol was Reg Park, who came originally from Leeds, and in Leeds, England, and grew up there, worked his way up, became Mr. Britain and then Mr. Universe. So he was my idol. He was in the Hercules movie stories. So everything was kind of related to Britain. And then also this family, the Bennett family in London, East London, on 335 Romford Road. They always had me stay over at their house, and they had a big gymnasium there where I worked out, and they were also organized the bodybuilding competitions. So everything kind of led always to the British and to England and all that stuff. So I'm a big fan of you guys and what you've done for my career and the inspiration that you brought and all that stuff. So it was great to be kind of like connected to you guys in one way or the other.
It's a real shame that you didn't stay here in the UK, because think what you could have achieved. You don't need to have a birthright citizenship to be Prime Minister of this country. So you could have got, unlike the US, you could have got the top job here.
Well, now you're saying that being Prime Minister of England is bigger than being Governor of California.
Oh.
I don't know about that, because remember, when you look at today, who are the economic powers of the world, I mean, California is the 5th largest economy with a $3.3 trillion GDP. So that means that only China, Japan, and Germany, and the United States itself is ahead of us. After that, we are in 5th rank. So we are ahead of England, actually, and France, and Italy, and all of those other countries. So this is how a kind of a big impact that we make worldwide. And of course, it doesn't mean that you're any less or anything like this. I'm just saying it has actually gone back and forth.
Read the room, man.
It's written many times, yes.
Read the room, we're all dying here.
And you know what is interesting about it? And I think I should mention that when we did our environmental policies, when I was governor of the state of California, I was always told that this is going to be terrible. I mean, going green means that you're going to lose jobs and the economy is going to go down and our revenue is going to decline and all this stuff. And the fact was, what I believed was that we can manage to protect the environment and the economy at the same time. And we were actually very successful in doing that. That now we have the strictest environmental laws in California, and at the same time, we are the #1 in the United States as an economy at the state of California. So if you think that you can actually protect both the economy and the environment at the same time, which I think should be a lesson to the Glasgow kind of environmental conference, COP26 this year, to let those nations know that they're always concerned and worried about going green will kind of wipe out the economy. It is not so. You can do both. You can protect both the environment and the economy.
So as a practitioner, well, most of us in this room, we read about Churchill, we study him. You've sat behind the big desk. As a doer of politics, of leadership, what does it mean to think about people like, well, Churchill in the past? Do you actually take things? Do you actually try and, what's that inspiration mean, doing that job?
Well, I think that, it's without any doubt, he's one of the greatest leaders in the history. And so I think that when you get into politics, like myself, I've been aware of Churchill and have read some of the things of Churchill, but I was not an expert or fanatic about it. But then when I became governor, it was very clear that this was a new arena that I was stepping into, and that I should read up on some people that have been very successful leaders. And one of the things was, Churchill and Abraham Lincoln and other people, Teddy Roosevelt, Ronald Reagan, and so on. And but I said to myself, there's so much to be learned by Churchill because, and then I found out also that we have a lot of things in common. I remember that first quote that I read was, never, never, never give up. I mean, I love that quote. And I said to myself, this is exactly what I did in bodybuilding. I never, ever gave up. I just kept going and going, no matter how many times people said, you can't do it, you won't be able to do it, to be the world champion, and you would never get to America and all this stuff. I said to myself, I would never, ever give up. And the same was in the political arena. I never gave up. The same was in acting, when they said you would never be able to go and become an international star because you have an accent and you have this overdeveloped body and all this. And so I never listened to that. I just believed in what Churchill said. Never, never, never give up. And, and also when you're down, when he says, if you're going through hell, keep on going. And, this is the kind of quotes that makes it so inspirational. Then when he talks also, when you look at his, his resiliency, this is very inspirational. If you think about how resilient he was, he was down and he was up and he was down and he was up. That's what happens in life. That's what happens in politics. That's what happens in a movie career. That's what happens in sports. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, sometimes the people are behind you, sometimes they're against you and all of this stuff. And I experienced that when I was a governor. It was like I won as an outsider to become governor of the state of California. But then, a year and a half later, we had a special election for some of the propositions that I wanted to introduce, and we lost. We lost all of the propositions, and then my poll numbers were down again. So of course, then I went back to the Churchill book I read about kind of like how did he deal with those towns. And, it was very inspirational to read those things. And because the year later, when we had the re-election again for my campaign and to get re-elected, I won again with 57% of the vote. So I went through this roller coaster ride. And then again, when we had the recession, then my poll numbers went down again. Then they went up again. And so I think there's so much to be learned. And this is why I always say, we can learn from history, especially from very historic and great people like Churchill. And I think it was very helpful to me going through my political career and going through the ups and downs. And they had great advice for those kind of things. And also, that when you realize that, democracy is one of those interesting things that, you find the shortcomings of democracy when you sit there as a leader. But I think that there was no one that put it better than he did when he just said, that democracy is, the worst system. But it is still better than all the others. And I think that he's absolutely right with that. There is no better system. No one has come up with a better system, but it has its downsides and it has its failures and stuff like that. And we can see this right now in America, and we can see it, I think, in other places around the world.
I'm interested, Governor, in the fact that Churchill achieved many of his greatest moments in coalition governments here in the UK, working with politicians from across the spectrum. And a lot of your most recent work, you seem to be in that field. You seem to be talking about bipartisanship in a country that's infamous at the moment for its partisan divides.
Well, I think the evil about politics is that they only think political, and they only do what their party prescribes and what the platform is, and so there are so many issues. Like, for instance, let's take the environmental issue. I mean, there is really no Democratic air and there's no Republican air. I mean, we all breathe the same air. So we all have to fight to get rid of pollution, because pollution kills 7 million people a year. So how can you make this a political issue? But the politicians and the parties will make it into a political issue. Luckily, you don't do that in England, because I've seen conservative governments endorse environmental changes and protecting the environment. And I've seen liberal governments do the same thing. So you don't have this problem. But we in America have a real problem there in this area, with everything being a political thing. How can you kind of argue and say it's a democratic issue? It's an issue by the Democratic Party, education. Well, education is something for everybody. Every child needs good education. What I'm fighting for, it doesn't matter if I'm a Republican or a Democrat, I'm fighting for equal education, that a black child has the same opportunities that a white child, and there's a Mexican child, and a Latino child has the same opportunities as an Asian child, that everyone, no matter what your income is, should have the same opportunities to have great education. And so to me, this is not a Democratic issue, a Republican issue, or conservative issue, or liberal issue. I said, this is an important issue to all of us. So this goes on and on and on. This kind of, it's healthcare, it's the same thing. The question is just to me, how do we insure everybody in California when I was governor? And then all of a sudden the Republicans said, oh, you're hanging out with Teddy Kennedy too much. So I said, what does this have to do with Teddy Kennedy? They said, well, he's a healthcare fanatic about universal healthcare. I said, me too, I come from Austria. Everyone was insured in Austria. Why California is this very powerful state, and we have so much money here, and we have the wealthiest people here. Why shouldn't we have everyone insured? So to me, those are common sense things. So I didn't have a coalition. I just had to find the art of working with the other side, the art of bringing Democrats in, and started working with the Democrats. So this is why when I became governor of the state of California, I just looked at the list of things that the Democrats were interested in, and then the things that the Republicans were interested in. And you can let her do something with America, not just stand around. So anyway, we just were kind of like looking at the list of things. And then I said, okay, the Republicans want to go and get infrastructure. I want to get infrastructure. And the Democrats want to get infrastructure. So we started negotiating about infrastructure. And then we started talking about, education. And we started talking about after-school programs. And we went through the list of things that we can do together. And then we started tackling the things that maybe we disagreed upon. And so this is exactly what we did. So some people, like in Austria and in Germany and in other places, they have coalition governments. we only have two parties, so therefore I had to kind of reach across the aisle and work with the other side. And it was very well done because the bottom line is that I don't see the other side as villains. It doesn't matter if to me, if it is a communist, if it's a socialist, or if it is a conservative, or whatever it is. I want to work with everyone together so we get the work done that is good for the people. That is the bottom line. To me, it is more important to be not a party servant, but to be a public servant. I always wanted to be a public servant. And this is what also goes back to Churchill, because Churchill was not an ideologue. I mean, he could see that sometimes the Conservative Party left him, and then he was a liberal, and then he felt that they left him, so he became a conservative. He went back and forth like that, because all he was interested in is in fulfilling the agenda and moving forward and making life better for the people of Great Britain.
Now, a lot of people are asking me whether, obviously you need a lot of prosthetics because you're in a lot better shape, but would you ever fancy playing Winston Churchill in a movie?
I think that has been done before, and I don't think that I could manage the British accent, to be honest with you. And I don't also think that I will be able to bulk up my six-pack as much as Winston Churchill did.
No, you need prosthetics, of course. But what about historical? Since I've got you, I've got to ask about historical roles. I mean, do you? What are some of the favourite roles you've played, or what would you love to play when it comes to historical drama?
Say hi. Hello, everybody. This is my little dog. Her name is Noodle. I call her, or Cherry. It's one or the other, but I mean, she always interferes, and she just loves to steal the show and kind of like be part of the action, right? Noodle, give me a kiss. Nice. Beautiful. Thank you. Now you go again. Very nice. Sorry about that. But anyway, so if you see Lulu coming in at any moment, then just also know that the animals like to be getting kind of attention when I do some kind of those kind of interviews and stuff like that.
We were told there would be animals. We were warned. Don't worry. So just tell me, what character would you love to play from the past? Would you like to bring to the big screen?
There's really, I mean, I specialized in kind of fantasy characters. If it is, Terminator or Conan the Barbarian and stuff like that. But those are the characters I was always very good in playing. And we're doing another movie now, a sequel to Twins with Danny DeVito, and where we find our third brother and all of that. So this is the kind of things that I do, but I don't play that much historical characters.
Okay, we've got obviously lots of people keen to ask questions here, Governor, if that's all right, if you're okay to take a few questions.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. We've got, what are they from the interweb? Here we go, over here.
Thank you very much. Governor, obviously Churchill, as well as being a conservative, was very much a progressive as well and spent time as a liberal. How do you think, if Churchill was to enter the American political scene today, he would be received?
I think very well, because, I mean, remember one thing, that what we are lacking is, having balls. And I think that he was known for that. I remember when I asked Dino De Laurentiis, one of the most famous producers in the world, in the history of movies. He made over 500 movies, and I did Conan the Barbarian with him, and Conan the Destroyer, and Raw Deal, and other movies like that. So, he became kind of a mentor of mine. And I said to him, Dino, how could you be so successful? And he said to me, he says, Schwarzenegger. He was Italian. He said, Schwarzenegger. Yeah. In Italy, we have the three C's. I said, what are the three C's? And he said, it's cavallo, cuore, di coglione. And he grabbed his balls. So I said to myself, he's absolutely correct. That's what it takes to be successful. And this is exactly what Churchill had. He had a great brain power. He had great intelligence. He was very, very smart. He had an extraordinary heart, but he also had balls. He had balls to make the right decisions, even though people were hating him sometimes for that, but he knew it was the right thing to do, especially before the Second World War, when others were feeling like they should make peace with Hitler and kind of almost surrender to him and to work with him. He knew that you can't work with that guy. That guy was just a maniac, and he was not to be worked with, and there will only be war. That's the outcome. And he was absolutely right. So, I mean, that took balls to do that. And this is exactly what we're missing today in politics a lot of times. People don't have the courage to do the things that are right. They're doing, can you do me a favor and not make noise when I talk here? Okay, good, thank you. And so anyway, so this is the kind of things that say people don't have the courage anymore to do those kind of things that needs to be done. They are rather just listening to the labor unions, who is paying for their campaigns. So they're looking at their, like for instance, for a politician, not to have the courage to go and say, we're gonna go and stop fossil fuels within the next 20 years. Or we're gonna go and stop, regular big engine cars that are fueled by fossil fuels. We're gonna create the hydrogen fueled engine. We're gonna create the electric engines, and we create technology where the cars will be even more powerful, but where we can power the cars, where we can power the cargo ships. Let's not forget the 15 biggest cargo ships in the world, polluting more than all of the cars together. So we can go and make those changes. But they don't have the balls to do it because they want to kiss up to the fossil fuel industry. I mean, remember that Donald Trump tried to bring back coal. I mean, it's like bringing back Blockbuster or fax machines or something like that. It's crazy to do those kind of things. So, I mean, politicians need to have the guts to do that. I remember that when I was governor, there was many times the question, should I just go along with the federal government or not? Because the federal government said that, Arnold, you cannot control greenhouse gases in California because they are not a pollutant. So I took the federal government to court. Now imagine that the federal government was also Republican. I took them to court, and we went all the way to the Supreme Court, where the Supreme Court finally said, yes, with conservative judges, yes, greenhouse gases are pollutant, and therefore we can regulate our own air. Well, how much brain power does it take to figure out that, the exhaust that comes out of the exhaust pipes from cars is a pollutant? But I mean, there were people that fought that. And so, I had the courage to do those kind of things. I had 15 of the biggest car manufacturers sit in my office and say, we're going to sue you, we're going to sue California, we're going to sue everybody because you're not going to tell us that we should lower our emissions. And I said, go ahead and sue me. I didn't back away. They promised me they're going to spend millions of dollars against me. They're going to do everything that they can to derail my campaign, and I would never get reelected. And I found all of those threats. The other politicians would start shaking about it, and I just laughed about it. And in the end, I won, because now our standards, our tailpipe emission standards that we created in California became nationwide under the Obama administration, and now our standards are nationwide. So this is the kind of things, but it takes guts to do that, because you have to fight your own party, you have to fight sometimes the opposite party, you have to fight everybody, and you're standing there by yourself, alone, and you say, am I doing the right thing? But I was convinced I was doing the right thing, because I wanted to make sure that we cut down that number of people that are dying every year because of cancer and because of death. People are dying left and right because of pollution. I mean, this is like inexcusable. We can do better than that, but it takes guts to do those kind of things.
We have a question from our online audience.
Governor, thank you. The question is, the theme of the conference is Churchill in freedom. Can you tell us what freedom meant to you growing up in war-torn Austria, the product of extremism from the Nazis?
Well, I mean, I had all the freedom in the world when I grew up, and because it was the post-war. I was born in 1947, but we definitely, I was suffering when I grew up of the after effect of the war, because, as you already said so eloquently, we lost the war, and because we lost the war, there was a bunch of losers around that couldn't yet digest this whole thing of losing. And they were drunk a lot. There was a lot of alcoholism going on. There was a lot of kind of like stress syndromes that were, that people didn't acknowledge then. That when you come back from a war, what it does to your mind and to your brain and to your psyche and all that stuff. And so there was alcoholism, there was violence around it. We were hit all the time when we were at home, and my friends, the neighbor kids, they were hit all the time. So it was this kind of crazy kind of thing where you just said, I can't wait to get out of there, out of here. And that, I think, gave me the inspiration to really kind of look for a way out. What can I do to get out of Austria and to get out of this kind of misery, what I interpret as misery? And so I think that I wanted to be free from all of that. And when I was 10 years old, I watched a documentary that we had in school about America. And I saw the high rises, and I saw the huge bridges, the Golden Gate Bridge, and I saw the 6-lane highways and the Cadillacs and all these fancy cars driving around, and Muscle Beach and Hollywood and all this. I said to myself, this is where I want to be. So I think this is what gave me the inspiration, and it also gave me the motivation to grow up poor and to grow up under this kind of somewhat miserable kind of conditions. It gave me the inspiration and the will to succeed. And I think that because of that, I'm sitting here today, because I think that without that upbringing and without America giving me all the opportunities in the world, and without, like I said, having the British help me launch my career in London with the Mr. Universe contest, and all these kind of combinations together made me be who I am today. So, but I think finally I'm in a place that is free. But I mean, at the same time, as we hail the idea of freedom, we also have to connect it always with our obligations, because with freedom comes also duties and obligations. We cannot just look for, I want to be free, and freedom is great and all this stuff, but we also have to think about what obligations do we have as a society to work together. It's no different than a sports team. You have, the more a team, a basketball team or a football team or a soccer team works together, and the more the less they think about their individuality during the game, but more as a group together, the more successful they are. And the same is also in politics. We have to go and work together. That's how we're going to be successful. If it is with the COVID situation, if it is with education situation, if it is environmental issues, or whatever it is, or kind of like reaching out and helping the underdog, the more we work together on those issues, the better it is for everybody, rather than just to think about ourselves and I'm free and my freedom is the most important thing. So this is so great, but we have to also have a certain kind of responsibilities that we have to connect with that.
We now have a couple of questions from our audience in the room.
You've been friendly for many years with Rabbi Marvin Heyer from the Simon Wiesenthal Center, who is himself a great Churchillian. I know you've talked about dialogues you've had with him about understanding history, especially Germany and Austria in the 1930s and 40s, and your own explorations of that. Could you talk a little bit about that experience and what that's taught you?
Well, I felt, after having come to America and learning more here about the Second World War and learning more about the history, which we were not taught in Austrian schools the best way, I realized that I, as the next generation, have to do everything I can to not let that happen again. And so I took this very seriously, and I tried to figure out how can I help. And through some coincidence, Rabbi Heyer reached out to me and says, could you help us here in Hollywood with getting Hollywood celebrities involved in fundraising activities for the Simon Wiesenthal Center? And I said to him, look, I would do everything that I can to help you. I said, because to me, this is a way of kind of giving back and doing something that is very important to our generation. So those things never happen again. We got to go and talk more all over the world about inclusion, about kind of like fighting prejudice. I mean, there's a prejudice core, I think, in all of us. But we have a brain, and we can fight that. We are not animals. We have a brain, and we can fight that. And so this is why it is important to make people aware of that. So I wanted to support the Simon Wiesenthal Center, and I brought in, great producers and studio executives and actors and so on. And they started really, kind of raising a lot of money. They were able then to build this huge center in Beverly Hills, the Simon Wiesenthal Center. I was a big fan of Simon Wiesenthal and his work. I met with him many times, and they celebrated even his 80th birthday here in Los Angeles. And he was a wonderful man. And so I've been a big supporter of that. And I think We have to do that. We all have to continuously work on getting rid of our prejudice and being inclusive, and always asking ourselves, are we really working hard to make everyone have the same kind of chances, the same kind of opportunities, and so on? And if not, then we have to go and work towards that to get that happening. Because to me, there's no reason that anyone should suffer because they don't make enough money or they don't have enough food. Or like, for instance, in Los Angeles, the homeless. I mean, we have 68,000 homeless in Los Angeles. This is a total failure by the politicians, not by these homeless people. These homeless people there's a lot of them working. There's working homeless, but they can't afford anymore that $3,500 single unit apartment. There's a one bedroom and it's $3,500. So this is crazy. And who created this $3,500 apartment? Was the politicians, because they had this no growth philosophy and attitude in the 80s and 90s, where they didn't let apartments buildings being built, and they made it almost impossible to get permits and so on. So now we are literally 500,000 to a million apartments short here in Los Angeles. And this is why it drives up the prices. And this is why now a lot of people cannot afford anymore to live here. That's why we have so many of the homeless. So this is created by politicians, not created by the private sector or by anyone or by the homeless people, by the politicians. They've failed over and over. And so now we have to figure out together. It doesn't matter now if they failed or not. We know that. But now we have to figure out, Democrats and Republicans alike, they have to figure out, how do we get these people homes as quickly as possible? How do we get them jobs that don't have jobs? And how do we get them mental care and to get them medical care and all of those kind of things? That is the bottom line. But all of this needs for us to work together and to be inclusive. And that's, I think, what the Simon Wiesenthal Center is preaching, is being inclusive and to make everyone equal and to be, kind of more open-minded about all this stuff.
We have another question in the back.
Governor Schwarzenegger, thank you for being here. I actually cast my first ballot when I was 18 for you in 2003. I'm a
Thank you.
California export here. Winston Churchill effectively made the world we live in more safe, and because he invested in the future between framing the Cold War and potentially even a little bit of the European Union. You've helped the University of Southern California with the Schwarzenegger Institute. Can you speak to that and the importance of the next generation's understanding of how important policy is so that we can all live together in a global world a lot better?
Well, the Schwarzenegger Institute was created because USC, the university itself, was interested in having me join them. But at the same time, I was so interested in creating an institute because I didn't want to just stop from one day to the next all of this work that we have done when I was governor. So, after a certain amount of years, we have term limits here. So after the term limits are over, then you have to get out. But I was still so excited and enthusiastic about environmental issues, about healthcare issues, about education issues, and about creating infrastructure and all of those kind of things. And our problems that we have with the drought here, our problems we have with earthquakes here, our problems we have with the violence here, and homelessness and all this stuff. So, and good politics, good government practices and so on. All of these kind of issues were still in me. So I said, I want to create the institute and I want to have this kind of discussions. So we get together just like you do. We get together and then we talk about those issues and we have the best minds come together. And of course, the institute is bipartisan. We don't look at things in the political way. We just want to solve the problems and help the world to solve the problems. So there's a wonderful events that we have in symposiums and lectures and stuff like that. And the whole idea is to turn on our young students that are at USC and to have them not just learn from the books, because the book knowledge is very good, but then when you can combine that with actual real life action and experiences, then it is much better, then it really sticks. And so this is why we have interesting kind of guest lecturers and really smart people coming there and have always a few hundred seats available in these lectures for the students. So the students can sit there in the front row, that they can ask questions to those leaders, they can learn from those leaders and really learn about how to craft policy and how they can make a difference. Because so many times people feel like they cannot make a difference. But like just the other day, my daughter was calling me, just to give you an example, and she was saying, today I got a call from the city hall, and they said to me that my request to fix the holes in the asphalt there on a road behind the Brentwood Mart now finally has been paved. Well, she says, I've been bothering them for 2 months. I've been saying there's holes there and people just wipe out and they ruin their suspensions in the cars and people are dripping there and all this stuff. I think they should fix it. Well, it just shows you, most people drive over those holes and they just say, oh, there's government people, they never do anything. The city is falling apart. Look at all this, they never do anything. They don't keep their promises. But my daughter just said, okay, let me pick up the phone and let me go on the internet and let me bombard them and just keep pushing and pushing. And she got it done. This whole road now is fixed and it is wonderfully paved and all this stuff. So it is kind of like, we all have the power to create change. We all can be architects of change. All we have to do is just, and this is what I teach our students always, is think not only about me, but think also about we. We. That is the important thing, to be able to switch back and forth. There is something in there for me, but also I have to fight for other people, for other causes that are bigger than me. And I think this is the attractive thing when you are in politics and when you get into a position like governorship or prime minister or whatever, or president, it's wonderful because it makes you switch from thinking just about yourself to thinking about everyone else. And I think that to me, I had this kind of like, from my bodybuilding days, when I was kind of like really interested in not only lifting for myself, but lifting the whole sport of bodybuilding and making everyone get into fitness, making everyone get into weight training, cross training, and jogging and boxing and wrestling and skiing, and just do some activity, do something every day. And I wanted to promote that, and I wanted to be an inspiration to the rest of the world, just like Reg Park, the guy from Leeds was, that became Mr. Universe, and was my great inspiration. So I wanted to be that inspiration to millions of people around the world. And now I want to be an inspiration to these young kids that are going to school when it comes to public policy, to not think in a political way, but to think about just how do we fix things? How do we get things done? And how do we make the life better in this country? And this is what it's all about. And this is what I'm kind of like teaching over there. I teach classes about the environment and about the, redistricting reform, how to make government operate better, how do we draw the district lines in a fair way and not let the politicians draw it, but let ordinary people draw it. And all of this, I get involved in things that sometimes people don't even understand what it is, but I understand what it is, and I know the way the political system is fixed, and I want to get rid of that and really create a fair political system here in America.
Thank you. Governor, your theme in politics is cooperation to find solutions. How do you deal with people who are extreme, full of hatred, the type of guys who storm Capitol Hill?
Well, I did, a speech about that, where I talked about that there were times where we went in the wrong direction here in America, and where people were lied to, and people have reacted in kind of strange ways to storm the Capitol. I'm the first one that says that our government in Washington sucks. I'm the first one to say that politicians, it doesn't matter if it's Democrats and Republicans, are not really performing up to par. I'm the first one to say that this government has been lying to us and has been, promising us things like immigration reform, or building infrastructure in this country, or creating true universal health care, or equality in education, and all of this kind of thing, equality in voting rights and all that stuff, and they haven't delivered. And this is pitiful, because this, like I say, this is like Republicans and Democrats alike. So there is a reason for people to be angry. There's a reason for people to protest. But I think that we still have to do it in a legal way. I have nothing against it when 5 million people turn up in Washington, D.C. and protest and have their flags and have their signs where they communicate with the signs and have press conferences there and all this stuff and just, block the Capitol. But don't storm the Capitol. That is not cool. That is not right. So protesting, yes. Letting your anger be expressed, yes. Letting them know the politicians they're not performing, yes. And also remembering when the next election is, that is the time where you can really express your anger and vote them out of office. Because the sad story is that Congress sometimes has a approval rating of 25%, but then 95% of the politicians get reelected. So it just shows you how fixed the system is and that we have to change that. And so this is why I'm frustrated. I'm frustrated. It doesn't matter if it's a Democratic administration or Republican administration. But I think it is important for people to note that we have to still do those protests within the law. That is the key thing. And then what I always feel is the more we talk about being together, reaching out to each other, trying to listen to each other. Remember what Winston Churchill said, that courage is what it takes to stand up and to speak. But he said it also takes the same courage to sit down and to listen. And I think this is exactly what is important, what these politicians have to learn to do. They have to listen. They have to listen to the people and be sensitive enough to see that they can't get anything done. And it is irresponsible what they do. And so we people have to make an effort to come together and not to hate each other because he believes that the conservative way is the right way. And I may believe the center way is the right way. And someone else believes that the left is the right way. We can all sit down together and we can talk about it. Okay, we believe that way. But now how do we get things done? The way we get things done is by not everyone expecting a straight 10, from 0 to 10 to 10. But you have to expect that when you start negotiating and start compromising, that maybe everyone walks away with a 7. And that's what we did when we did our infrastructure negotiations. And because of that, instead of my $100 billion infrastructure deal that I wanted, I got a $60 billion infrastructure deal. So we made deals where we did, but we were able then to rebuild our roads, our highways, our bridges, our on-ramps, our off-ramps, our schools, university buildings, our levees, and our prisons, and all of this kind of stuff. So this was done by negotiating and by compromising. I didn't get everything, they didn't get everything, but we got it done. That is the important thing that we need to do.
Thank you so much, Governor. I just got one thing to say. We're going to wrap up very shortly here, but just one more thing from me. You've dangled your love of the UK here, and you've suggested perhaps one day you might return. If only there was some well-known catchphrase you're associated with about returning in some way.
Well, first of all, remember there's several catchphrases. One of them is, "Get to the chopper!" The other one is, "Crush your enemies, see them driven before you and hear the lamentation of their women." And that is from Conan the Barbarian. That was my line in Conan the Barbarian. And then, of course, the most famous one is from Terminator, "I'll be back."
Yay! Let's hope so.
Governor, it's Randolph Churchill here, and we are absolutely thrilled. What a fantastic, heartfelt talk you have given us all this evening. And to Dan Snow, you really got the best out of that. So before you disappear from our screen tonight, Governor, I wanted to pass on our thanks of my family and all our International Churchill Society members. My great-grandfather would have admired your spirit and your courage and your independence of thought and mind. Your appreciation for the cigar has not gone unnoticed, and we loved seeing your dog making a storming appearance on our screens as well. But the International Churchill Society would also like to recognise your remarkable public service over so many years and your leadership by presenting you with the International Churchill Award, which will be making its way to you in California to compliment you and your magnificent cigar. And here, I'm going to put up on the screen another bust of Churchill. And of course, Churchill was a man of writing, and so we have a beautiful Churchill pen to present to you as well in California. But on behalf of us all, we would like to say thank you so much for spending so much time with us today. What you said was really thoughtful, inspiring, and let's give the younger generation every chance. And it was really thrilling to hear about your transition from Austria to the United States via Romford Road in England. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Thank you. And just remember that if anyone is interested in this sculpture behind me and this bust of Churchill, you can get it at the Rao Antiques from Philip Youngberg, because people have been emailing us and asking us, where do you get that? And there's still some available, I'm sure of that. So that's where you get it, Rao Antiques from Philip Youngberg, okay? Thank you very much, everybody. And thank you for this wonderful Churchill cigars that you've given me. I love them, and I'm gonna smoke them, okay? Trust me. And I can't wait to be back in Great Britain again. Like I said, I love your country.
Well, thank you so much to Randolph, and thank you to Arnold Schwarzenegger. I hope you all will agree that we have had a fantastic first day. On behalf of myself and my co-presenter, Catherine Carter, I'd like to thank all of our speakers who've taken part today. And to our online audience, thank you for tuning in. We will see you again tomorrow at 2 p.m. UK time, where we will be joined by Emma Soames, Charlotte Jones of Paul Roget, and enjoy sessions from Washington, D.C. and Fulton, Missouri, as well as our final keynote from Andrew Roberts. We're even going to have a unique preview of a forthcoming Churchill play. And speaking of unique previews, just as a reminder, you can get not only a unique preview, but also bid on some truly remarkable and unique Churchillian items in our online auction. And finally, just to close, returning to the theme of freedom today, whether it's 1898, 1945, or today, freedom is not just something that is won on the battlefield. It is personal to each of us, whether it is physical, intellectual, or emotional. So this understanding certainly drove Winston Churchill at each stage of his life. And in times of challenge, from the Second World War to pandemics, it's something that we suddenly remember we cannot take for granted. So until then, this is London signing off. Good night and goodbye until tomorrow.